The sapphire waters of Blue Haven shimmered under the golden hues of sunset, gentle waves kissing the golden shore as the salty breeze wove through the narrow cobblestone streets. Luxury yachts lined the harbor, their lights reflecting on the water like scattered stars. To tourists and the wealthy visitors who docked here, Blue Haven was paradise, a haven of endless summer nights and lavish celebrations. But to Astrid Harrington, this town was nothing more than a gilded cage. For 5 years, she had been trapped in a loveless marriage to Cyrus Whitaker, a man she had never truly understood. Blue Haven wasn't home, it was a prison disguised as a dream. Tonight, like every other night, Astrid stood behind the bar at the Driftwood, her hands moving skillfully as she poured cocktails for the evening's guests. She had grown used to watching the world from behind the counter, hearing countless stories, while knowing that no one ever truly listened to hers. What she didn't know was that tonight, everything was about to change. 5 years ago, at just 23, Astrid had believed that love could be built over time. When she agreed to marry Cyrus Whitaker, she didn't love him, but she needed something stable. After losing her mother to illness, her father, a once revered boat builder turned alcoholic, had drowned himself in silence, leaving Astrid to navigate life alone. She had once been the pride of the Harrington name, but now she was adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Then came Cyrus. He was never a gentle man, never one for sweet words or grand gestures. As a boat mechanic, his hands were as rough as the life he had lived. Gruff, withdrawn, he drank more than he spoke, and the only charm he possessed was a certain rugged carelessness that some women in town found alluring. But he pursued Astrid persistently. He bought her drinks at the Driftwood after her shifts, left wildflowers on the counter with an awkward grin. He wasn't sweet, but Astrid, lost and grieving, saw him as an anchor. When he proposed with a simple silver ring, Astrid said yes, not out of passion, but because she believed he could be a good husband. She was wrong. Just weeks before the wedding, she found out Cyrus had been involved with Foxy Monroe, a woman who worked at the Rusty Anchor bar. That night, passing by the tavern, she saw him with Foxy, his arm draped around her, smiling at her in a way he never had with Astrid. The next morning, she confronted him, her voice thick with betrayal. "Do you love her?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why did you do this to me?" Cyrus dropped to his knees, his voice desperate. "I was wrong, Astrid. It was a mistake. I choose you, I swear." And she, foolish as she was, believed him. But 5 years later, Astrid lay in the same bed in their small harborside home, still a wife untouched, unwanted. Cyrus never changed. He never touched her, never loved her, never spoke tender words. He drank, came home late, and whenever she reached for him, he only muttered, "Not now, I'm tired." 5 years had passed, and Astrid was still waiting for a husband who had never truly been hers. Midnight. Blue Haven was quiet. The only sounds were the waves lapping against the docks and the faint glow of harbor lights flickering in the distance. Astrid walked slowly along the cobblestone path home after her late shift at the bar. As always, she didn't expect Cyrus to be waiting for her. He never did. But when she pushed open the worn wooden door, he was there, leaning against the kitchen counter, his bloodshot eyes fixed on her. In front of him, on the scratched wooden table, a neat stack of white paper lay untouched. Astrid's stomach twisted. "Sit down," he ordered, voice low and firm. She didn't move. Something about the air felt wrong. "What is this?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. Cyrus picked up the papers and tossed them toward her. "Divorce papers." "I can't do this anymore, Astrid. Let's end it." Her heart didn't break, it only sank. Not from love, but from failure. From the realization that she had been holding on to nothing all this time. "We can try harder," she started, but even to herself her words sounded empty. Cyrus let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Try for what? Another 5 years? For what, Astrid?" Astrid clenched her fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. For 5 years, she had fought for this marriage alone. She had waited, endured, hoped. And yet, Cyrus had never once chosen her. She had thought that if she was good enough, patient enough, he would come back to her. But the truth was far crueler. Cyrus never wanted her. He wanted the Harrington name beside his to keep from being seen as a failure, and now that he was done pretending, he discarded her like something that had outlived its use. Astrid looked down at the papers, then up at Cyrus, and she no longer wanted to fight for him. She picked up the pen, her hands trembling. It wasn't losing him that scared her, it was the whispers of the town, the judgment in their eyes. The first Harrington woman to be abandoned. Even Cyrus didn't want her. That fear cut through her like a blade. But then she remembered the sleepless nights, the cold bed, the emptiness that had been her life for the past 5 years. Astrid took a deep breath. Her fingers trembled as they hovered over the paper. Was this truly the end? Not just of her marriage, but of the illusion she had clung to for so long? For 5 years, she had told herself that love could grow, that patience would be enough. But as she stared at Cyrus, at the man who had never truly chosen her, she knew the truth. She had already lost him long ago. Perhaps she had never had him at all. With a firm, decisive stroke, she signed her name. Cyrus said nothing. He simply stood, grabbed his coat, and walked out, not even sparing her a final glance. The door slammed shut behind him, and for the first time in 5 years, Astrid could finally breathe. But the emptiness remained. She didn't cry. She only felt lost in a world that no longer felt like hers. She looked around the house and realized it had never truly been home. And tonight, she couldn't stay here another second. Grabbing her bag, she stepped outside. The cold night air hit her skin, sharp and unforgiving. She had thought she would feel relief, but instead there was only a vast emptiness stretching before her, like an ocean without a shore. Where did she belong now? Not in that house. Not in the life she had fought to keep for so long. Her feet carried her forward, not out of instinct, but because she had nowhere else to go. And so she walked toward the driftwood, because that was the one place where she could forget. The driftwood was quieter than usual. The sea was calm tonight, and so was Blue Haven. Only a few scattered patrons remained, a group of old sailors swapping stories of faraway waters, a young couple whispering under the dim glow of lanterns. Astrid stood behind the bar, just as she had for the past 5 years, but tonight, everything had changed. She was no longer Astrid Whitaker, no longer a wife waiting in vain for a man who had never truly seen her. She was free. But freedom didn't mean happiness. As she stared at the glass of whiskey in her hands, all she felt was emptiness. Then the wooden door swung open, carrying a gust of cold ocean air. Fergus Calloway stepped inside. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair tousled from the sea breeze, deep blue eyes gleaming under the lantern light. His crisp white shirt hung loosely, the top few buttons undone, revealing sun-kissed skin. A man who looked like he belonged to the ocean, untamed yet effortlessly magnetic. Astrid had never met him, but she knew who he was. Fergus Calloway, a renowned yacht architect, owner of Calloway Marine Designs, the luxury firm that had recently expanded to Blue Haven. He walked straight to the bar, placing strong hands on the polished wood, his gaze fixed on her. "Whiskey, the strongest you've got." His voice was deep, smooth, carrying both confidence and quiet intensity. Astrid nodded, quickly pouring his drink, but as she set the glass down, she realized he was still watching her. Not the way most men did, not with idle curiosity, not with fleeting interest. His gaze was steady, intentional. Fergus lifted his whiskey but didn't drink just yet. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, a small knowing smile tugging at his lips. "What's your name?" Astrid hesitated for a split second. Most men never asked. Most didn't care. But Fergus wasn't most men. There was something in the way he looked at her. Calm, steady, like he had already seen something in her that she had yet to see in herself. "Astrid." Fergus nodded, as if her name had just confirmed something he had already known all along. "Long night?" he asked, his deep blue eyes never wavering. Astrid tensed. No one had ever asked her that before. She forced a small, practiced smile. "I'm used to it." But Fergus wasn't convinced. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, voice low, thoughtful, like the murmur of the tide against a wooden hull. "Blue Haven is beautiful, but you don't seem to belong to that kind of peace." It wasn't a question, it was a truth laid bare. Astrid froze. No one had ever said that to her before. Something in his words hit a nerve, something she had buried deep for the past 5 years. "Some cages look like paradise, Astrid," Fergus murmured, his voice steady, as if waiting to see if she would face it. Astrid took a sharp breath, feeling her chest tighten. She didn't know why, but she wanted to listen. Because for the first time, someone truly saw her, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for that. Fergus didn't rush his drink. He simply swirled the whiskey in his glass, his deep blue eyes studying Astrid as she wiped the bar. Even without looking at him, she could feel his gaze, not indifferent, not judgmental, but curious. It was Fergus who finally broke the silence. "How long have you lived here?" Astrid hesitated for a moment before answering. "My whole life." Fergus raised an eyebrow. "And you've never left Blue Haven?" The question made her pause. Never left Blue Haven? She had never truly thought about it. Her life had always been here, the driftwood, the cold house by the harbor, the cobblestone streets she knew by heart. Her youth had never been about traveling, about exploring. It had only been about waiting for a man who never truly came back to her. "I've never been anywhere else," she finally admitted. Fergus didn't look surprised or pity her. He simply nodded and took a slow sip of whiskey. "Do you want to leave?" This time, Astrid didn't have an answer right away. She didn't know. Or maybe she was afraid to admit that she always had. She just never dared to. "Now that you're free, what do you truly want?" Fergus's question made her throat tighten. For 5 years, Astrid had never asked herself that. She had simply existed, endured, survived, like an abandoned ship left to rot in the harbor. But now, the tide inside her was shifting. Her voice dropped to a whisper, almost like a confession. "I want to live, truly live." Fergus didn't respond immediately. He simply set his glass down, tilting his head slightly as he watched her. "Then live, Astrid." His words hit her like a wave crashing against the shore. She had heard so many promises in her life, from Cyrus, from the men who passed through the driftwood, but no one had ever said this to her before. Not wait, not endure, but live. Astrid didn't know what to say. But for the first time in 5 years, she didn't feel trapped anymore. Outside, the ocean waves rolled onto the shore, and for the first time in her life, she wanted to set sail. He stood up, placing a few bills on the counter. But before he left, he slipped a small piece of paper toward her. A phone number. "I'm not the kind of man who forces anyone into anything, but if you ever want a real conversation, call me." And then he walked out, leaving Astrid standing there clutching the slip of paper, her heartbeat racing in a way she hadn't felt in a long, long time. Astrid didn't leave the driftwood right away after her conversation with Fergus. She remained behind the bar, hands busy polishing glasses, but her mind was elsewhere. "Then live, Astrid." Fergus's words still echoed in her head, as if they had been carved into her soul. But just as she allowed herself to think of new possibilities, a voice from the past pulled her back to reality. "Astrid." She froze. "Cyrus." He stood just inside the doorway, his face gaunt, his breath thick with alcohol. His old jacket hung loosely over his shoulders, his stance unsteady, as if he'd been drinking all night. "We need to talk." His voice was rough, his gaze glassy from intoxication. Astrid tightened her grip, forcing herself to stay calm. "There's nothing left to say, Cyrus." Her voice was colder than ever. But Cyrus wasn't ready to let go. He took a shaky step forward, his voice desperate, almost pleading. "I was wrong, Astrid. I was a fool. But I see it now. I need you." She stared at him, feeling a slow, burning anger rise within her. 5 years. She had waited 5 years for him. And now, when it was all over, when she could finally breathe, He wanted her back? No, she said firmly. You had your chance, Cyrus, and you threw it away. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even sad. Because the truth was, she no longer cared. I waited for you, she continued, her voice steady. I gave you everything, and you gave me nothing. Now I have nothing left to give you. Cyrus opened his mouth, but she had already turned away, because he was nothing more than a ghost from a past she had finally left behind. Cyrus's jaw tightened, his expression shifting from desperation to frustration. He opened his mouth to argue, but the door swung open again, and Fergus stepped inside. His eyes immediately found Astrid, then slowly shifted to Cyrus. And in that instant, the entire atmosphere changed. Astrid couldn't remember when the change began. Maybe it was the night Fergus first walked into the driftwood, his gaze deep and unwavering. Maybe it was the first time he asked if she had ever left Blue Haven. But she knew one thing. Since he arrived, she no longer felt trapped. Fergus never rushed her. He never pushed her to leave Blue Haven, never made promises he couldn't keep. He was just there, showing up at the bar each evening, watching her like he saw something she had yet to see in herself. They began talking more about distant seas, about the yachts he designed, about the mornings he spent sketching intricate lines onto blueprints. Do you like what you do? One night Astrid asked as she set his whiskey down. Fergus smirked slightly, rolling the glass between his fingers. I do, but what I love more is being out there. Designing a yacht isn't enough. You have to feel the wind on your skin, hear the waves beneath your feet to truly understand it. Astrid went quiet. She had never thought about it that way. And you? Fergus's eyes held hers. Do you like your life in Blue Haven? She didn't answer right away. She could lie. She could smile like she always did. But Fergus wasn't someone she could fool. I don't know, she finally sighed. But I think I've never truly lived. Fergus didn't look surprised. He simply set down his drink and reached into his pocket, pulling out something small. A bracelet, handcrafted from seashells and small ocean stones, strung together with a simple thread. Did you make this? Astrid blinked, surprised. Fergus nodded. I collect shells from every shore I've been to. Some are from the Caribbean, some from the Mediterranean. But this one, he tapped the smallest shell, is from Blue Haven, because no matter where you go, this place will always be a part of you. Astrid felt something tighten in her chest. You know, Fergus, her voice was soft, but filled with an emotion even she couldn't name. For the first time, I feel like someone truly sees me. Fergus smiled, and that night, Astrid knew her life had truly begun anew. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the skies over Blue Haven in shades of gold and crimson. But Astrid no longer saw this place as a prison. She stood at the harbor, the seashell bracelet Fergus had made still wrapped around her wrist, a quiet reminder that the world was far bigger than the limits she once placed on herself. From a distance, Fergus approached, his tall frame steady against the evening light. Will you go? He asked, his deep blue eyes reflecting the sunset. Astrid took a deep breath, inhaling the salty ocean breeze. She was no longer afraid. She turned to him, a smile full of certainty and life. You know, Fergus, she said, her voice steady, for the first time in my life, I want to see the world. Fergus smirked slowly, as if he had always known her answer. Below the docks, the waves rolled against the shore, no longer holding her back, but calling her forward. 1 year later, the sea was calm in Blue Haven, the sky painted in fiery hues of sunset. On the soft sands, Astrid and Fergus stood hand in hand, surrounded by a simple yet heartfelt wedding. No grand halls, no extravagant vows, just the ocean as their witness, the wind whispering its blessings, and the people who truly loved them. Astrid smiled radiantly, her eyes filled with happiness and peace. Today, she wasn't just marrying a man, she was choosing a new life, a path she had built with her own hands. From afar, Cyrus stood alone, a shadow against the fading light, a man lost in the wreckage of his own choices. Once, she had been his, but he had never truly seen her. Now, Astrid was no longer the woman waiting behind closed doors. She had stepped into the light, had learned to love and be loved the way she deserved. Fergus squeezed her hand, and for the first time in her life, Astrid saw what love truly looked like. It wasn't indifference, it wasn't obligation. It was this, a gaze so steady, so full of devotion, that she felt it anchor her soul. A love that did not ask her to wait, to change, to prove herself. A love that simply was. And beneath the golden sky, Astrid knew she had finally found her safe harbor.